My wife got a disrespectful tattoo for her AP, so I divorced her. So here's how this whole thing started. I'm gonna be real with you guys. I didn't think my marriage was gonna end because of a tattoo of all things. But here we are. Me and Molly, we've been together for 5 years, married for 3. I thought things were good, you know? We had the usual arguments like any couple, nothing crazy. But looking back now, I can see how stuff started to unravel. It all kicked off when we were engaged. Molly's always been into tattoos, which is fine. I don't have anything against them or people who get them. I just didn't want one myself, like it's not my thing. Anyway, at our engagement party, she came up to me all excited and was like, "Babe, wouldn't it be awesome if we got matching tattoos to celebrate?" And I kind of laughed it off at first, thinking she wasn't serious. But nope, she was dead serious. I told her, "Look, I don't mind if you get a tattoo. I'm just not interested in getting one myself." She seemed a little bummed, but didn't make a big deal out of it right then. I thought that was the end of it. Like, yeah, she might bring it up here and there, but we're adults, right? She can do her thing and I'll do mine. Then we get married. A few months after the wedding, she brings it up again, asking me about matching tattoos. At this point, I've already said no, so I kind of remind her of that, thinking she'd just drop it. But nope. Every couple of months, like clockwork, she'd mention it. Each time, it was more intense. Like she was getting more and more upset that I wasn't on board with this whole tattoo thing. I gotta be honest, it was getting super annoying. I told her the same thing every time. You can get a tattoo if you want, but I don't want one. Simple, right? Apparently not. She started acting like this was a relationship deal breaker or something, which made no sense to me. Anyway, fast forward a bit. Molly gets promoted at her job. Now, I was really proud of her for that. She worked hard and deserved it. She got transferred to a new office, a new team, and started talking about this one coworker of hers, Josh. According to her, Josh was this super cool guy with all these tattoos, and apparently, he was giving her advice about what kind of ink to get. And listen, I didn't care that she was talking to a dude at work. I'm not that insecure or whatever. But the way she was bringing him up all the time, yeah, that started to bug me. Like, she'd never stop talking about Josh and his tattoos. I didn't say anything at first, because I didn't want to be that guy, you know? The one who gets all paranoid just because his wife is talking to another dude. But deep down, I was like, something's off. Then one night, Molly hits me with this comment that totally caught me off guard. We were just chilling, and she looks at me and says, "Josh thinks you're not a real man because you're scared to get a tattoo." I'm sitting there like, what? Where the hell did that come from? I've told her 100 times I'm not scared of getting a tattoo. I just don't want one. There's a difference, right? So I asked her, "Why would you throw that at my face? It sounds like Josh is trying to get in your pants, to be honest." And get this. She just goes, "If the shoe fits." I was stunned. What does that even mean? Like, did she agree with him? Was she actually thinking I'm not a real man because I won't get some random tattoo? It just didn't make sense to me. We'd never had issues like this before, so I couldn't figure out why she was suddenly being so cruel about it. She stormed off to the bedroom and slammed the door, and I just sat there thinking, is this really happening? It felt like things were starting to go downhill fast, but I wasn't sure if it was just about the tattoo or if there was something more going on. The next couple of days were awkward as hell. Molly didn't talk to me at all. We were barely even in the same room together, and when we were, there was this weird tension. It was like she was mad at me, but for what? Because I didn't want a tattoo? That just didn't make sense. Then, a few days later, she told me she was going shopping after work. No big deal. She did that all the time. But when she came home, she had this look on her face like she was waiting for me to ask her what was up. So I asked her how shopping was, and she just smiled and rolled up her sleeve to show me this brand new tattoo on her forearm. Now, let me tell you, I wasn't expecting that. It was 2 Chinese symbols. She told me they meant strength and independence. And listen, I don't speak Chinese, but even I knew something was off about it. Molly is white, she doesn't speak a word of Chinese, so I'm already thinking this whole thing is kind of weird. But what really got me was the initials underneath the symbols, JWT. I looked at her and said, "What do the initials stand for?" And that's when she paused. You know that feeling when you just know someone's about to say something that's going to piss you off? Yeah, that was me. She took a deep breath and said, "They're Josh's initials." I didn't even know how to respond at first. I was just sitting there like, "You got another guy's initials tattooed on your arm? Seriously?" Her explanation made it worse, if that's even possible. She said Josh had taken her to his tattoo artist, and he stayed with her the whole time, supporting her while she got the tattoo. So she wanted to honor their friendship by adding his initials. Like, what the actual hell? I told her flat out that it was disrespectful to have another dude's initials tattooed on her body, and she needed to get it removed. But she just flipped it around on me, like I was the bad guy. She said I was trying to control her, and that I was the one who said she could get a tattoo if she wanted. She even threw it back in my face that I refused to get matching tattoos with her, so she shared the experience with Josh instead. That was the moment I knew we were in real trouble. I couldn't believe she was acting like I was in the wrong for being upset. I mean, how could she not see that what she did was completely disrespectful? We barely spoke for the next few days. When we did, it was always about the tattoo, and every time, she'd tell me to just get over it, like it was no big deal. But it was a big deal to me, a huge deal. After that whole tattoo thing, I started seeing Molly in a completely different light. You know when you've been with someone for so long, and then one day you just realize they're not the person you thought they were? Yeah, that's where I was at. The tattoo was bad enough, but it wasn't even just about the ink on her skin. It was the attitude, the way she acted like I was crazy for being upset. It's like I was living with a stranger. So one night, I'm sitting in the living room watching TV and Molly's on the phone. She's in the next room, but I can hear her laughing and chatting away. Normally, I wouldn't care. It's just a phone call, right? But then I hear her say Josh's name. My ears immediately perked up. At this point, I've got all these doubts swirling around in my head, and hearing her talk to him just rubbed me the wrong way. I couldn't make out everything she was saying, but it was enough to know they were way too comfortable with each other. The way she was laughing at whatever he was saying, it wasn't a coworker laugh, if you get what I'm saying. I started getting that sinking feeling in my gut. You know when something's not right, but you can't put your finger on it yet? Yeah, that. When she finally gets off the phone, I just flat out ask, "Why are you talking to Josh so much?" She gave me this look, like I was being the unreasonable one, and goes, "He's my friend, Jake. What's the big deal?" I couldn't help it. I snapped back, "The big deal is that you're acting like he's more than a friend. You got his initials tattooed on your arm for crying out loud." That was probably the wrong thing to say, because she immediately went on the defensive. "You don't understand our friendship," she said. "Just because you're insecure doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong." Insecure? That's what she was going to hit me with? I wasn't insecure. I was confused. I was trying to make sense of why my wife seemed more connected to some random dude at work than she was to me. But you can't argue with someone who's already made their mind up that you're the bad guy, so I just let it go. For the moment, at least. The next couple of weeks were a blur. Molly and I were barely talking. It felt like we were just coexisting, living in the same space but not really living together, if that makes sense. I'd go to work, come home, and we'd barely say 2 words to each other. She was on her phone more and more, and I'm guessing she was texting Josh half the time. Every time I'd ask what she was doing, she'd get defensive, so I just stopped asking. One night, though, things took a turn. Molly came home late from work. She'd been doing that more often, always with some excuse about staying late or going out for drinks with coworkers. Normally, I wouldn't be suspicious of something like that, but given everything that had been going on, I couldn't help but feel like something was off. She walked in the door, and I could smell perfume on her. It wasn't hers. I knew what her perfume smelled like, and this wasn't it. So I asked her, "Where have you been?" She rolled her eyes at me like I was being paranoid and said, "I told you I went out with some coworkers. You don't have to wait up for me every time." "Yeah, but you smell like someone else's perfume," I shot back. That got her attention. She looked caught off guard for a second, then quickly recovered. "Oh, that's probably just from one of the girls hugging me goodbye or something." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in my gut told me she wasn't telling the whole truth. I didn't want to start a huge fight, though, so I let it go for the night. But the doubt? That didn't go anywhere. A few days later, things got even weirder. Molly was getting ready for work one morning, and I noticed she was spending way more time on her appearance than usual. Now, I'm not saying it's weird for someone to want to look good, but this was different. She was putting on makeup, doing her hair, picking out a nice outfit, stuff she normally didn't do for work. It was like she was going on a date or something. So I asked her, "Why are you getting all dressed up for work?" She laughed it off and said, "Can't a girl want to look good for herself?" Sure, that's fair, but something still felt wrong. I didn't push it, though. I didn't want to come off as controlling or whatever, but in the back of my mind, I was already connecting the dots. Her coming home late, the phone calls with Josh, the perfume. It was all adding up to something I didn't want to admit yet. Then came the moment that confirmed everything. One evening, she told me she was going to a work event and wouldn't be home until late. I didn't think much of it at first, but later that night, I had this nagging feeling. You know when your gut just knows something's wrong? Yeah, that. So I decided to go for a drive and clear my head. As I'm driving around, I pass by this bar we used to go to sometimes, and guess what? There's Molly's car parked out front. I wasn't even looking for it, but there it was. My heart started racing. I pulled over, not really sure what I was going to do, but I couldn't just leave it alone. So I walked in, and there she was, sitting in a booth in the corner, laughing, with Josh sitting next to her. They weren't just sitting across from each other, they were sitting next to each other, real close. She didn't see me at first, but when she did, her face went pale, like she'd been caught. I didn't cause a scene or anything. I just walked up, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "Is this the work event?" Molly didn't even try to come up with an excuse. She just sat there, frozen, while Josh looked like he wanted to disappear. I didn't even give her a chance to respond. I just turned around and walked out. That was the moment I knew it was over. I wasn't going to sit around and pretend like nothing was happening anymore. She could have her tattoo and her friendship with Josh. I was done. When she got home later that night, I was already packing my stuff. I didn't wait for her to explain. I didn't need her to. We both knew what was going on, and I wasn't going to stick around and be made a fool of anymore. Update 1. After I walked out of that bar and saw Molly sitting there with Josh, I was done. No more games, no more excuses. I went home and packed up my stuff. I didn't care if it was late or if I had to sleep somewhere else that night. I wasn't staying in the same house with her anymore. I didn't even want to look at her, let alone be in the same room. When Molly finally got home, it was like she already knew what was happening. She walked in and saw my bags by the door, and her face just dropped. She didn't even try to act surprised. She stood there for a second like she was trying to come up with the right words, but nothing came out. Eventually, she just asked, "So you're leaving?" I looked her right in the eyes and said, "Yeah, I'm leaving. What did you expect?" She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, looking at me like she was waiting for me to cool down and change my mind. But I wasn't changing my mind. I was done being treated like a joke. Finally, she said, "It's not what you think." That's when I lost it. "Oh, really? So you're not sitting in a bar with some guy who you've been obsessing over, who you've got tattooed on your arm, while you've been lying to me for weeks, because that's what it looks like to me." She looked like she wanted to defend herself, but she didn't have a leg to stand on. I wasn't stupid. I knew what was going on, even if she hadn't admitted it out loud yet. She tried one more time. "We were just talking." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Just talking? That's what you're going to go with?" At that point, I didn't care what her excuse was. I'd heard enough. I grabbed my bags and started heading for the door, but before I could leave, she grabbed my arm. I turned around and there were tears in her eyes. For a split second, I felt like I should stop, like maybe there was still something left to salvage. But then I remembered everything, all of it. The tattoo, the late nights, the phone calls, and most of all, the fact that she lied. I pulled my arm free and said, "This isn't on me, Molly. You did this. You made your choices." She didn't try to stop me after that. I walked out the door, and that was that. I didn't look back. I ended up staying at a buddy's place for a few days while I figured out what to do next. It wasn't exactly ideal, but it gave me space to clear my head. My friend Ryan was pretty shocked when I told him what happened. He'd met Molly a few times, and she'd always seemed so nice and normal, you know? But I guess you never really know someone until something like this happens. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, text messages, and just trying to get my life together. Molly tried to reach out a few times. She sent me texts saying things like, "I'm sorry," and "Can we talk?" But I wasn't interested in hearing her apologies. What was there to talk about? She had another guy's initials tattooed on her, for God's sake. That's not something you can just explain away. I wasn't stupid. I knew that this wasn't just some innocent friendship like she tried to claim. I had that gut feeling from the start, but I didn't want to believe it at first. It was all too clear now, and honestly, I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses or whatever twisted version of the story she was going to try to sell me. A few days after I left, she showed up at Ryan's place. I guess she figured out where I was staying. I wasn't exactly hiding, but I didn't expect her to come find me either. Ryan wasn't home when she knocked on the door, so it was just me. I didn't want to let her in, but she was standing there in the rain, looking like a mess, so I let her inside. I wasn't about to have some dramatic scene out in the street. She came in dripping wet and sat down on the couch. Neither of us said anything for a while. I could tell she'd been crying, but I wasn't going to fall for that. I just sat there waiting for her to speak. Eventually, she broke the silence. "I messed up, Jake. I know I did." I didn't say anything. What was there to say? She already knew how I felt. She kept talking, though. "I never meant for it to get this far. I never meant to hurt you." I looked at her and just said, "But you did. You hurt me. And you didn't just hurt me once. You kept doing it. You lied to me over and over." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I know. I'm sorry. I don't even know why I did it. I was stupid. Now, maybe a few years ago, I would have taken her words to heart. maybe I would have forgiven her and tried to work things out. But after everything, I just couldn't. I wasn't the same guy who could just let this slide. I asked her, "Did you sleep with him?" There it was, the big question. The one I already knew the answer to, but I needed to hear her say it. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I did." Hearing her admit it didn't make me feel any better. If anything, it just made it all feel more real. There was no going back now. This was it. I stood up and walked over to the window, staring out at the rain. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell, to scream at her for betraying me, but I was too tired for that. I just felt drained. "You should go," I finally said, without even turning around to look at her. She didn't argue. She didn't fight. She just stood up, grabbed her purse, and left. And just like that, it was over. The divorce process after that was surprisingly quick. We didn't have kids or anything tying us together, so there wasn't much to fight about. I kept the house, she moved in with a friend, and we both signed the papers. Done deal. We only spoke a few more times during the whole thing, and every time we did it was civil, polite even. But it felt cold, like we were two strangers, not two people who had been married for years. When the divorce was finally finalized, I felt relieved. Not happy, not sad, just relieved. It was like a weight had been lifted off my chest. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to keep wondering if she was lying to me, if there was something going on behind my back. It was done. I'd never imagined my marriage ending like this, but life has a way of surprising you, I guess. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I'm ready to move on. Update 2. After the divorce was finalized, I thought that'd be the end of it. Like, I thought we'd both move on, go our separate ways, and that'd be it. But as usual, life doesn't really go the way you expect. And Molly? She wasn't quite done messing with me. A couple of weeks after everything was settled, I started getting these random texts from her. At first, they were just those polite, meaningless kind of messages, you know? Like, "Hope you're doing okay," or "Just checking in." I ignored most of them because, honestly, what was there left to say? We weren't together anymore, and I didn't need her checking in on me like we were still friends or something. Then, one night, she sent me this long message out of nowhere. It was like a wall of text. She started talking about how she was struggling with the divorce and how things weren't going the way she thought they would. She mentioned that she was having problems with Josh, of course, and that her life was kind of falling apart. Now, I'll admit, part of me felt a little bit of satisfaction reading that. It was like, well, what did you expect? But another part of me, a smaller part, I guess, felt bad. I mean, I didn't want her life to fall apart. I just wanted her to take responsibility for what she'd done, but it was like she was still playing the victim. She ended the message by asking if we could meet up to talk. She said she needed closure, that she wanted to apologize face to face. I wasn't sure what to do. On one hand, I didn't really want to see her again. On the other, I guess I could understand needing some closure. Plus, I figured it'd be the last time I'd ever have to deal with her. So I agreed. We met up at this little coffee shop not far from where we used to live. I got there first, sat down, and waited. The whole time I was sitting there, I was going over everything in my head. Like, I was mentally preparing for whatever excuses or apologies she was going to throw at me. When she finally walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked different. I'm not saying she looked bad or anything, but there was something off. She looked tired, worn out, like life had really hit her hard these past few weeks. It wasn't the Molly I remembered, that's for sure. She sat down across from me, and we kind of just sat there awkwardly for a few minutes. Neither of us really knew how to start. Eventually, she spoke up. "Jake, I'm sorry," she said, her voice shaky. "I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I realize now how much I hurt you." I nodded, not really sure what to say. I wasn't there for an apology. I was there to hear her out and close this chapter for good. But she kept talking. "I shouldn't have done what I did," she continued. "With Josh, I didn't mean for it to happen the way it did. I wasn't thinking clearly." I raised an eyebrow. "You weren't thinking clearly? Molly, you had another guy's initials tattooed on your body. You lied to me for months. How is that not thinking clearly?" She looked down at the table, fiddling with her hands. I know it sounds bad, but I wasn't happy. I felt like we were drifting apart and I didn't know how to deal with it." I couldn't help but scoff at that. "So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to go to him? You thought cheating was the solution?" She didn't say anything. She just sat there looking guilty, but I wasn't in the mood to let her off the hook that easily. I'd spent too long trying to figure out why she'd done what she did, and now she was finally admitting it. But it didn't feel like enough. It wasn't enough to just say, "I'm sorry." I took a deep breath and leaned forward. "You know, Molly, I loved you. I would have done anything to fix whatever was wrong, but you didn't give me a chance. You didn't even let me in. You just went behind my back and betrayed me." Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. I'd seen her cry before, and it always felt like a way to avoid responsibility. I wasn't falling for it this time. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." I sat back in my chair, feeling a mix of frustration and relief. Frustration because she still didn't seem to fully get it, and relief because I was finally getting everything off my chest. "Well, you did hurt me," I said flatly, "and now you're dealing with the consequences. We're not together anymore, and that's because of you." She wiped her eyes, trying to hold herself together. "I know," she said quietly. I don't know what to do now. My life is a mess." I shook my head. "That's not my problem anymore, Molly. You made your choices, now you've got to live with them." We sat there in silence for a while after that. I think she realized that there wasn't much more to say. She wasn't going to get some big reconciliation or closure. This was just the reality of what happened. She made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. After a few minutes, she finally stood up, grabbed her bag, and said, "Thanks for meeting with me. I needed this." I didn't really respond. I just nodded, and she walked out. And just like that, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I hadn't realized how much I needed to say those things until I said them. The next few weeks were a lot easier after that. I wasn't getting texts from her anymore, and I didn't have that nagging feeling in the back of my head about what had happened. It was done. Over. I could finally start moving on with my life, and that's exactly what I did. I got back into my routine, started hanging out with friends more, focusing on work. It felt good to get back to normal, or whatever my new version of normal was. Molly was in the past, and that's where she was going to stay. I'm not saying it was easy. It wasn't. There were moments when I'd think back to everything and feel angry or sad or confused. But every time those feelings came up, I'd remind myself that I made the right choice. I wasn't going to let her drag me down anymore. The truth is, sometimes things just fall apart, and there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to pick up the pieces and keep going. And that's what I did. Update 3. So here we are. It's been about 6 months since the divorce, and honestly, I feel like a completely different person. I didn't think I'd get to this point so quickly, but cutting Molly out of my life was like flipping a switch. It's weird how things that used to matter so much just don't anymore. I've been focusing on myself, trying to rebuild, getting back to doing things I enjoy, hanging out with friends, and just not having to worry about someone constantly making me feel like I'm not enough. It's crazy how much emotional weight lifts off your shoulders when you're not in a toxic situation anymore. But even though things have been going well for me, of course, Molly wasn't done stirring the pot. One day I got a text from a random number. It was a long message, one of those that you have to scroll down to read. At first I thought it was spam, but when I started reading, it became clear it was from Josh. Yeah, that Josh. The message was some kind of weird apology, but also this backhanded way of explaining why things with Molly weren't going the way he thought they would. It was one of those, "I didn't mean for things to happen like this" kind of deals. But the part that really got me was when he started complaining about Molly. Apparently, after I left, their little relationship went downhill fast. He said something like, "I thought things would be different between us once you were out of the picture, but it turns out Molly's not who I thought she was." He went on about how she'd become clingy and demanding, and how she wasn't the same person he'd gotten close to at work. I couldn't help but laugh. Like, what did this guy expect? He got involved with a married woman and thought everything would be sunshine and rainbows once I was out of the picture? It was almost too perfect. It's like karma hit him right in the face, and now he wanted to talk to me about it? Nah, I wasn't going to entertain that. I didn't reply. What was the point? I didn't need an apology or explanation from him. As far as I was concerned, they both deserved whatever mess they'd gotten themselves into. Let them deal with each other. I was moving on. But a few days after that, Molly tried reaching out again. This time, it was a phone call. I hadn't heard from her since that awkward coffee shop meeting, so I was surprised when her name popped up on my screen. I hesitated for a second, wondering if I should just let it go to voicemail. But curiosity got the best of me, so I answered. Her voice sounded shaky, like she'd been crying or something. "Jake, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I really need to talk to you." I sighed, already feeling drained by the conversation we hadn't even had yet. "What is it, Molly?" She launched into this whole story about how things with Josh were falling apart. She was going on and on about how he wasn't treating her right and how she regretted everything that had happened between us. She actually said, "I made a mistake, Jake. I didn't realize how much I needed you until you were gone. Now, maybe a few months ago, that might have gotten to me. Hearing her say she regretted leaving might have felt like some kind of validation. But not anymore. I was over it. I didn't need her to tell me she'd made a mistake because I already knew that. Molly, I said, cutting her off. We're done. You made your choices and now you have to live with them. I've moved on, and you need to do the same. She got quiet for a minute, and I could hear her sniffling on the other end. Part of me felt bad, but I wasn't going to get sucked back into that mess. Not after everything. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I thought things would be different with him, but it's not. I miss what we had. That was the moment I knew she didn't actually miss me. She missed the security. She missed having someone who was there for her, no matter what. But she didn't care about me. Not really. She was just upset that things hadn't worked out with Josh the way she wanted. I can't help you, Molly, I said, trying to stay as calm as I could. You made your bed, and now you've got a lie in it. That was it. She didn't say anything else, just hung up. And that was the last time I heard from her. After that call, I felt free. Like, truly free. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I just felt done. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe without all this weight on my chest. Looking back now, I realized that what I went through was probably for the best. I mean, yeah, it sucked. It was messy and painful. And there were days where I didn't think I'd ever feel normal again. But now I'm glad it happened. It woke me up. It made me realize what I deserve and what I won't put up with again. Since then, I've been focusing on myself. I've reconnected with old friends, picked up some new hobbies, and even started dating again. Nothing serious, but it's been fun. And for the first time, I'm not looking for someone to fill some void or fix what was broken. I'm just living my life, and it feels pretty damn good. I know people say time heals all wounds, and yeah, that's true to a point. But for me, it wasn't just time. It was about letting go of Molly, of the hurt, of the betrayal. Once I did that, everything else kind of fell into place. And if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that you can't control what other people do. You can only control how you react to it. Molly made her choices, and I made mine. I chose to walk away, to move on, and that's probably the best decision I've ever made. So, yeah, that's where I'm at now. Life's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was. And honestly, I wouldn't trade that for anything. On my 16th birthday, parents drop a bombshell. You're moving in with your aunt, no questions asked. So, let me set the scene for you. I had just turned 16, and like any normal kid, I thought I might get a birthday cake, maybe a lame gift. Something simple, right? Nope. What I got instead was a ticket out of my own house. Literally. My parents didn't even sugarcoat it. They told me, point blank, that they needed my room for the baby. My sister Carla, the golden child, is pregnant, and suddenly, I'm out of there. It wasn't like a discussion or anything. It was like a quick meeting with HR where they tell you you're fired. No emotions, no second thoughts. They just sat me down, looked me straight in the face, and said, "You're going to live with Aunt Lydia." I didn't even get a say. I couldn't believe it. It was my birthday, and they couldn't even wait until the next day to throw me out. Now, I've always known Carla was the favorite, okay? She's 22, expecting a baby, and for as long as I can remember, she's been the center of their world. But this? I mean, I wasn't expecting much for my birthday, but getting kicked out of my own room to make space for her unborn baby? Yeah, that's a new low. They didn't even try to soften the blow, no. Hey, we know this is tough, but we love you, or anything like that. Just, we need your room for the baby, pack your stuff. And I didn't get it at first, like, okay, fine, Carla's pregnant, but we have a guest room. Why can't they just turn that into the nursery? When I asked, they just kind of looked at each other, then finally came out with it. Matt needs a place to stay too. Matt, Carla's boyfriend. The guy's like 25 and has his own place. But somehow, my parents decided he needed to move into our house too. So yeah, the guest room went to him, and the baby, my room, and me, shipped off to Aunt Lydia's like an old piece of furniture no one wants anymore. I guess I could have fought harder, but what's the point? I've been dealing with this kind of crap my whole life. I've learned to expect nothing from them, because every time I've hoped for even the tiniest bit of love or attention, they let me down. This wasn't a surprise. It was just another reminder that to them, I'm always going to be second place to Carla. Always. The worst part? Carla didn't even bother showing up for this family meeting. I mean, yeah, I get it. She's pregnant and probably didn't want to deal with the awkwardness, but still. It's not like we ever had a super close relationship, but this? It felt like she was just too okay with me being booted out to make space for her new little family. Like, she couldn't even face me while our parents were basically kicking me out of my own home. When I went upstairs to pack, it didn't feel real. I mean, I'd spent my whole life in that room. Every crappy little birthday I'd had, every time I tried to avoid my parents' drama, I'd go up to that room and just zone out. And now, just like that, it wasn't mine anymore. I started throwing stuff into a suitcase, not even sure what I was packing. It felt weird, like I was moving out of my life, not just my room. And it wasn't like my parents helped or anything. They just watched, like they were waiting for me to hurry up so they could get on with their day. They offered to drive me to Aunt Lydia's like it was some kind of favor. I could have walked, honestly, but at this point, I was too tired to fight it. So I just let them drive me. The whole time in the car, they acted like we were on some normal trip. My mom was talking about dinner plans, like she hadn't just told her son he wasn't welcome in his own house anymore. When we finally pulled up to Aunt Lydia's, there was no emotional moment or anything. They didn't even pretend to care. Just a quick, "Here we are, see you later," before they drove off. Aunt Lydia, on the other hand, looked at me like I was some stray dog that had been left at her doorstep. Not in a bad way, more like she was about to take me in and give me the love I'd been missing out on my whole life. She hugged me as soon as I got out of the car. The difference between her and my parents was so obvious. She actually cared. I could feel it. She didn't even need to say anything, but when I told her what happened, she was furious. When I laid it all out for her, the birthday, the eviction, the baby room stuff, she couldn't believe it. I think at first she thought I was exaggerating, but once I told her the whole story, she got quiet, like she was processing the level of messed up that this situation was. Then, without saying a word to me, she grabbed her phone and walked into the other room. I couldn't hear much, but I knew she was on the phone with my dad because her voice went from calm to super angry in about 2 seconds flat. And that's not like Aunt Lydia at all. She's usually so chill, the type of person who never raises her voice. But whatever my dad said to her must have really pushed her buttons, because I've never heard her yell like that before. When she came back, her face was still red and she looked pissed. She sat down, took a deep breath, and told me what had gone down. Apparently, my dad had told her that I wanted to move out, that I was excited to stay with Aunt Lydia for a while, like I'd volunteered to give up my room for the baby. That's why Aunt Lydia didn't question anything when they asked if I could move in. She thought I was the one who wanted to leave. I just sat there, stunned. I mean, I always knew my parents weren't great, but this, lying to my own aunt to make themselves look better, that was a whole new level of low. Aunt Lydia apologized to me over and over again, saying she would have never agreed to it if she knew the truth. She said she couldn't believe my parents would treat me like that, and that I was welcome to stay with her for as long as I wanted. Honestly, I didn't even know what to say. It felt good to be somewhere where I wasn't treated like garbage for once, but at the same time, I couldn't stop thinking about how messed up my parents were. They didn't even care about me enough to tell the truth. They just wanted me out of the way, and they didn't care how it happened. I went to bed that night in Aunt Lydia's spare room, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to walk on eggshells around anyone. I wasn't scared of what mood my mom or dad would be in or worried about Carla getting all the attention. It was peaceful. But there was this weird, empty feeling too, like I'd lost something important, even if that something wasn't that great to begin with. In the end, I guess getting kicked out wasn't the worst thing that could have happened to me. At least now I was with someone who actually gave a damn. But still, it hurt. Knowing that your own parents would rather lie and shove you out of the house than deal with you, that sticks with you. All right, so I'm living with Aunt Lydia now, and I gotta say, it feels weird. Not in a bad way, but it's just different, you know? I mean, I've lived my entire life under my parents' roof, even if it was a crappy situation most of the time. And now, here I am, in a house where someone actually wants me there. It's almost too much to handle. Aunt Lydia has been super welcoming, like, she's really trying to make sure I feel at home. The first couple of days, she went out of her way to make me feel comfortable, like making me breakfast, asking if I wanted to redecorate my room, stuff like that. It's nice, but honestly, it felt strange at first. I'm not used to anyone caring about what I want. I was so used to just fading into the background at home, and now suddenly here's someone paying attention to me. But I'll admit, it took me a while to get used to it. Like, the first morning after I moved in, I came downstairs and Aunt Lydia had made this huge breakfast. I'm talking pancakes, eggs, bacon, the whole deal. She smiled at me and said, "I thought you could use a good breakfast to start the day." And I just kind of stared at it, like I didn't even know what to do with it. At home, I was lucky if I got a piece of toast before I ran out the door for school. I sat down, ate a bit, and Lydia kept asking me about my plans for the day. And honestly, I didn't have any. I was just trying to wrap my head around everything. The whole moving out thing, my parents not even bothering to check on me, It was all still sinking in. I mean, yeah, I didn't want to live with them anymore, but it's still weird to think about how fast they were willing to throw me out. After breakfast, Aunt Lydia had to go to work, so I was left alone in the house. That was another thing that felt strange. I was just there. No one telling me what to do, no one hovering over me or ignoring me like my parents did. It was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to constantly be on edge. So I decided to make a post online about my story just to get it out. But then, that afternoon, things got interesting. I was just chilling on the couch, minding my own business, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. Now keep in mind, this was like 2 days after they'd kicked me out, and they hadn't said a word to me since. So I was kind of curious to see what she had to say. The text? "We need to talk. That's it. No, how are you doing? Or are you okay?" Just a cold, robotic, "we need to talk." Honestly, I wasn't sure if I should even bother responding, but curiosity got the best of me, so I replied, "About what?" What followed was a bunch of texts from my mom about how I embarrassed the family by posting online. Apparently, some of my extended family had seen the post, and it had caused a bit of a stir. But instead of asking if I was okay, or maybe realizing how much they'd screwed up, my mom was more concerned about how it made her look. She kept saying things like, "Do you realize how this reflects on us?" And, "You've made things difficult for your father and me." I couldn't believe it. I sat there, reading the texts, just getting angrier and angrier. They kicked me out on my birthday, lied to Aunt Lydia about it, and now I'm the bad guy for telling the truth. I was done with it. I didn't even bother replying after that. I just threw my phone on the couch and tried to distract myself by watching TV. Later that evening, Aunt Lydia came home, and she could tell something was up. I guess I wasn't doing a great job of hiding how pissed off I was. She sat down next to me and asked if I was okay, and at first I didn't want to burden her with all this. But she's got this way of making you feel like it's okay to talk, you know? So I told her about the texts from my mom, how they were more concerned about their reputation than what they'd actually done to me. Aunt Lydia didn't even flinch. She just nodded and said, "That sounds exactly like your parents." I laughed a little because, yeah, it was spot on. Then she said something that really hit me. "You don't owe them anything, you know. You're not responsible for their reputation or how they feel. You're allowed to be angry." And that's when it clicked. I was angry. I'd spent so long just accepting the way things were, letting them treat me like crap because I thought that's just how it was. But now, I was done. I didn't owe them anything. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I started blocking out my parents more and more. I didn't respond to their texts, didn't even look at them after a while. They weren't going to get to me anymore. Aunt Lydia helped me with that too. She didn't say much, but just having her around, knowing she had my back, made everything easier. But things weren't totally calm yet. A few days later, I was at school, just trying to get through the day, when I noticed my parents had shown up. Yep, they actually came to my school like that was going to fix anything. I saw them standing outside the gate, waving me over like nothing was wrong. My first instinct was to ignore them, but they were pretty loud, and my friends started noticing. I felt my heart pounding. Like I didn't want to deal with this drama in front of everyone. But my friends? They had my back. A few of them literally formed a circle around me, like they were some kind of human shield. It was kind of funny, but also super reassuring. I wasn't alone in this. Eventually, I had to go over and talk to them. I walked up, keeping a safe distance, and said, "What do you want?" My mom started going on about how I wasn't answering their calls or texts, and how they were worried about me. I almost laughed. Now they were worried? After kicking me out and ignoring me for days? Then they dropped the real reason they were there. My grandparents, the ones with all the money, had found out about what they did to me, and now my parents were freaking out because they were scared of losing their inheritance. Yeah, that's what this was about. Not me. Not my well-being. Just money. They didn't care about fixing things with me. They just wanted to make sure they didn't lose their precious payday. I stood there staring at them, not even knowing what to say. It was like everything I'd always suspected was laid out in front of me. They didn't care about me. They never had. And now they were only trying to reel me back in because it benefited them. Not me. I told them I wasn't coming home. Not now, not ever. And then I turned around and walked away. Their voices faded behind me as I rejoined my friends, who were all watching the whole thing go down. I don't know what my parents did after that. I didn't look back to find out. All I knew was I was done with them. Completely done. And for the first time, I felt free. When I got back to Aunt Lydia's that day, I told her everything. She wasn't surprised. She said something like, It's always about money with them. And she was right. But you know what? It didn't matter anymore. I had Aunt Lydia, and I had people who actually cared about me. That's all I needed. Update 1. So, after the whole school confrontation with my parents, I thought maybe things would settle down. You know? Like, they'd get the message that I wasn't coming back and we could all just move on. But of course, that would be way too simple for my life. A few days went by and I was feeling pretty good. Aunt Lydia was being her usual awesome self, making sure I was comfortable and all that. It was like the first time in forever that I wasn't constantly stressed or waiting for the next bad thing to happen. I'd even started to get into a routine: school, hanging out with my friends, coming back to Aunt Lydia's place, and just chilling. Things felt normal, or at least as normal as they could be after getting kicked out of your house. But then, the drama found its way back in, like it always does. It started with a message from Carla. I hadn't heard much from her since the whole eviction thing, other than that one text asking to talk, which I had pretty much ignored. But this time, she was blowing up my phone. Like, text after text. At first, I didn't even want to open them, but curiosity got the best of me. I mean, we were siblings. Maybe, just maybe, she was trying to make things right. Turns out, not really. Her text started off super casual, like she was trying to ease into something. Hey, how are things at Aunt Lydia's? Hope you're doing okay? Stuff like that. Then, out of nowhere, she drops this. Mom and Dad are really upset. They think you're being unfair by not talking to them. Unfair? Really? I couldn't believe it. How was I the one being unfair here? I was the one who got kicked out. I was the one who got lied to. And now, somehow, I was the bad guy for not running back into their arms? I didn't reply right away. I needed to process it. I wasn't even angry at this point, more like exhausted. It was like every time I thought I'd escaped the drama, they found a new way to drag me back in. I was pacing around the living room trying to decide what to do when Aunt Lydia walked in. She took one look at me and knew something was up. What's wrong? She asked, sitting down on the couch. I showed her the text from Carla and she just shook her head. They're trying to guilt trip you. Classic. And yeah, she was right. My parents were pros at the guilt game, and it seemed like they'd roped Carla into it now. But what really got to me was the next part of Carla's message. She said, You know, it's not too late to fix things. If you come home, we can all move past this. Mom and Dad are ready to talk. Move past this? Like what? Pretend it never happened? Go back to living in a house where I didn't matter? Where I was just the extra kid they barely tolerated? No thanks. Aunt Lydia must have seen how frustrated I was getting because she put a hand on my shoulder and said, You don't owe them anything. You know that, right? And that's when it hit me. I didn't owe them anything. I didn't need to fix things. I didn't need to go back to that toxic situation just to make them feel better. It was like this weight lifted off my chest, and I realized I could actually say no. I could choose not to go back. I grabbed my phone, ready to respond to Carla, but then I hesitated. What was I supposed to say? I didn't want to come off as harsh, but I also didn't want to let her think I was caving to their guilt trip. So I kept it simple. I'm not coming back. I'm happy here. I hit send and waited. And waited. She didn't reply right away, which was honestly a relief. I was tired of the back and forth. I thought maybe that would be the end of it, but no. Not even close. A few hours later, my phone buzzes again. This time, it's my mom. She sent this long message about how I was tearing the family apart and how I needed to come home to make things right. It was filled with all this guilt-heavy language about family bonds and forgiveness, like I was the one who needed to apologize. I couldn't believe it. My mom was actually trying to make me feel bad for standing up for myself. She went on and on about how it was time to let go of the past and move forward together. But all I could think about was how they never once took responsibility for what they did. They never said sorry for kicking me out, never admitted they were wrong. All they cared about was making it look like everything was fine again. I was about to respond when Aunt Lydia chimed in again. Do you really need to reply to that? And she was right. I didn't. What was the point? It wasn't like anything I said was going to change their minds. They weren't looking for an actual conversation. They just wanted me to fall back in line. So I didn't reply. I blocked my mom's number. I know it sounds harsh, but I was done playing their game. I was done letting them mess with my head. The next day at school, I felt weirdly free. Like I'd finally broken away from all the nonsense. My friends were supportive too. They knew what was going on and kept checking in on me, making sure I was okay. It was nice having people around who actually cared. But of course, my parents weren't done. Later that week, Aunt Lydia got a call from them. I wasn't in the room, but I could hear bits and pieces. My dad was talking about family responsibilities and being mature, which was pretty ironic coming from the guy who literally kicked his kid out to make space for his grandkid. When Aunt Lydia hung up, she looked at me and said, "They're still trying to get you to come home, but don't worry." I shut it down. She told them straight up that I wasn't going back and that they needed to stop pushing me. She even threatened to get a lawyer involved if they kept harassing me, which I didn't even know she could do. But apparently she was serious about it, and honestly, that made me feel safer than I had in a long time. So, that's where things stand now. My parents have gone radio silent since Aunt Lydia's threat, and I haven't heard a peep from Carla either. It's been quiet, almost too quiet, but I'm not complaining. For once, I feel like I have control over my life, and that's something I never thought I'd have. I don't know what's going to happen next. Maybe my parents will give up and leave me alone, or maybe they'll keep trying to guilt trip me into coming back. But either way, I'm not going back. I've got Aunt Lydia, I've got my friends, and I've got a life that doesn't revolve around being ignored or mistreated. And for the first time, I'm okay with that. Update 2. So after all the drama with my parents trying to guilt trip me into coming home, things finally started to calm down a bit. Or at least I thought they did. I mean, it had been quiet for a while, too quiet. My parents went radio silent after Aunt Lydia's warning, and I hadn't heard from Carla since I told her I wasn't coming back. For a minute, I actually thought that maybe, just maybe, they'd backed off for good. But of course, nothing stays calm for long in my life. One evening, Aunt Lydia and I were just hanging out in the living room watching TV. It was one of those rare moments where I felt, I don't know, peaceful. Like everything was normal, or at least as close to normal as it gets. I wasn't thinking about my parents, school, or any of the usual crap. It was just me and Aunt Lydia watching some mindless show, and I was actually relaxed. Then my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first. I didn't want to ruin the moment, but it kept buzzing, over and over. Finally, I grabbed it and saw it was Carla, again. At first, I thought it was going to be more of the same. Her telling me how unfair I was being, how I needed to talk to mom and dad, blah, blah, blah. But this time, the texts were different. She wasn't mad. She wasn't trying to guilt trip me. Instead, she was apologizing, like full-on apologizing. "I'm sorry for everything," she wrote. "I should have stood up for you." I stared at the screen, not sure how to react. I mean, after everything, why now? Why was she suddenly sorry? Then she kept going. "I didn't know they were going to kick you out. They told me you wanted to leave. I didn't think it would go this far." Now, that threw me off. I knew my parents lied about a lot of things, but I had no idea they'd lied to her too. Carla kept texting, explaining that our parents had spun some story about how I wanted to move in with Aunt Lydia, that I was totally on board with the whole thing. And she believed them. She even told me that she thought I was being selfish by not helping with the baby, which is why she didn't fight back when they kicked me out. She didn't realize how bad it actually was for me until she saw the stuff I posted online. It was a lot to take in. Aunt Lydia must have noticed the look on my face because she paused the show and asked, "What's going on?" I handed her the phone, not really sure what to say. She read through the texts, her face going from curious to a little surprised. "Well, that's something," she said, handing the phone back to me. "What are you going to do?" And honestly, I didn't know. Part of me was still angry at Carla, even though I could see that she'd been lied to just like I had. But another part of me, well, I felt bad for her. She was in a messed up situation too, dealing with all the pressure from our parents, the pregnancy, the lies. Maybe she wasn't the bad guy I thought she was. So I texted her back. I didn't jump right into forgiveness or anything, but I told her I appreciated the apology. I said I needed time to process everything, but that I wasn't mad at her anymore. That felt like the right thing to say, honest but not too harsh. Then Carla hit me with another bomb. She told me she was planning to move in with Matt, her boyfriend, and that she didn't want to live with mom and dad anymore either. Apparently, things had been getting really tense at home since I left, and she was feeling trapped. She said, "They're trying to control everything, and I can't take it anymore." That made me pause. For so long, I thought Carla was the golden child, the one who always got everything she wanted from our parents. But now, hearing her side of things, it sounded like she was just as much a victim of their control as I was. It was weird, like I'd been seeing everything through this one lens, and now that lens was cracking, and the truth was a whole lot messier than I thought. She kept texting, saying how she felt bad for not standing up for me sooner, how she wished she'd done something before it got to this point. And for the first time, I felt like maybe we were on the same page. Maybe we weren't enemies after all. That night, I didn't sleep much. I just kept thinking about everything, about how messed up our family really was. It wasn't just me versus them anymore. Carla had her own struggles, and even though she'd let me down before, she was trying to make things right now. That had to count for something, right? The next day, I decided to meet up with Carla. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but I figured we needed to talk face to face, not just over text. We agreed to meet at this cafe downtown Neutral Territory, so it wouldn't feel like either of us had the upper hand. When I got there, she was already sitting at a table by the window, looking nervous. That was weird to see too. Carla, the confident one, actually looking anxious. I sat down, and for a few seconds, we just kind of stared at each other, not really knowing how to start. Finally, she broke the silence. "I'm really sorry," she said, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I didn't know how bad it was for you. I was so wrapped up in my own stuff I didn't even notice." I nodded, not really sure what to say yet. It was hard to be mad at her when she was sitting there, looking genuinely sorry. I didn't know they were going to do that to you," she continued. "And when I found out, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to fix it." There it was. That guilt I knew she'd been carrying around. And maybe that was what I needed to hear. That she did feel guilty. That she knew she'd messed up. "I'm not mad at you anymore," I finally said. "I get it. They lied to you too. But I'm not coming back home, Carla. I can't." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I wouldn't expect you to. I'm leaving too. I can't live with them anymore. They're trying to control everything about the baby, about Matt and me. I just can't do it." We sat there for a while talking about everything, about our parents, about how things had gotten so bad, about what we were both going to do next. It was strange, but in a way it felt like we were finally on the same side. For the first time, I felt like Carla actually understood me. When we finally left the cafe, I didn't feel completely at peace, but I felt like we'd taken a step in the right direction. Things weren't perfect, but they didn't need to be. For now, I was just glad that Carla and I were talking again, and that maybe, just maybe, we could start to fix what was broken. That night, when I got back to Aunt Lydia's, I told her everything that had happened. She smiled, nodded, and said, "Sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom for people to see things clearly." And maybe she was right. Maybe Carla and I had both hit that point, but at least now we were climbing out of it together. Update 3. So after that meetup with Carla, things got, well, complicated, but also kind of clearer at the same time, if that makes any sense. I thought maybe after talking things through with her, we could just move on, go our separate ways, and leave all the family drama behind us. But, of course, that's not how life works, especially not in my family. A few days after I met Carla, Aunt Lydia and I were having one of our usual chill evenings. We just finished dinner, and I was getting ready to head up to my room when there was a knock at the door. Now, this doesn't sound like a big deal, but Aunt Lydia never has visitors at night. Like, ever. She's a quiet person, and her friends usually drop by during the day. So both of us were a little thrown off by the timing. Aunt Lydia looked at me with this puzzled expression like, "You expecting someone?" I shook my head and we both walked to the door. She opened it and, surprise, there stood my parents. I could feel my heart sink. Like, really? After everything, they had the nerve to show up here unannounced and try to get me back into their mess? I thought they'd given up after Aunt Lydia's threat to get legal involved. But nope, here they were, standing on her porch like nothing had happened. My mom had that fake, concerned look on her face that she always pulls out when she's trying to manipulate me. My dad just stood behind her, looking awkward, like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Can we come in?" my mom asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Aunt Lydia didn't even look at me before saying, "No, I don't think that's a good idea." I almost smiled at that. Aunt Lydia doesn't play around when it comes to setting boundaries. My mom's face dropped, and she sighed like she was the victim in all this. "We just want to talk to you, honey. Please." I wasn't having it. I'd been through enough, and I wasn't about to let them drag me back into their drama just because they suddenly decided they wanted to talk. I folded my arms and leaned against the doorframe, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's there to talk about? You kicked me out. You lied to Aunt Lydia. And now you just show up like everything's fine?" My mom's eyes got wide, and she stammered, "It wasn't like that. We thought it was best for everyone." Best for everyone? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You thought it was best to kick me out on my birthday because Carla's pregnant? Seriously?" My dad finally chimed in, his voice quiet. "We didn't handle things well, okay? But you need to come home." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Why? So you can keep pretending like I don't exist while you bend over backward for Carla and the baby? No thanks." Aunt Lydia, sensing things were getting heated, stepped in. Look, I think it's best if you two leave. He's made it clear he's not coming back. My mom wasn't giving up that easily, though. She started tearing up, the classic guilt trip move she always used when things didn't go her way. We're your parents. We love you. We want to fix things. But here's the thing. I'd finally realized something. They didn't want to fix things for me. They wanted to fix things for them. They wanted to sweep everything under the rug, make it seem like we were one big happy family again. Also, they wouldn't have to deal with the fallout of their actions. But I wasn't playing along anymore. You had plenty of chances to fix things, I said, my voice low but firm. But every time you chose Carla. You chose her over me over and over again. So don't stand here and act like you care now. The silence that followed was heavy. My mom just stared at me, the tears still in her eyes. But this time, I wasn't falling for it. I wasn't going to be guilted into going back to a house where I was nothing more than an afterthought. My dad looked like he wanted to say something, but instead he just sighed and put a hand on my mom's shoulder. "Let's go," he muttered. My mom looked like she wanted to protest, but after a few seconds she turned and walked back to the car. Her shoulders slumped. My dad followed her without another word. Aunt Lydia closed the door, locking it behind them, and turned to me. "You okay?" I nodded. But the truth was, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was relieved. It felt like I'd finally stood up for myself, for real this time. But another part of me felt, I don't know, sad. Like no matter what I said, no matter how much I tried to cut them off, they were still my parents. And it sucked knowing they were always going to choose Carla over me. But that's the thing, isn't it? Family doesn't always mean what we want it to mean. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the worst. And that's a hard pill to swallow. Later that night, I got a text from Carla. She said our parents had told her about what happened and that she was sorry they had tried to force me back. She wasn't on their side this time, though. She said she understood why I didn't want to come home and that she was moving in with Matt, like she'd told me before. She ended the text with, "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." And you know what? That hit different. Coming from Carla, the one person I'd always thought was part of the problem, hearing her say that made me realize I wasn't alone in this. Maybe we weren't as close as some siblings, but we were starting to get there. I showed the text to Aunt Lydia, and she smiled. "You've come a long way, you know that?" I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but deep down, I knew she was right. I wasn't the same kid who'd been kicked out on his birthday. I'd learned to stand up for myself, to choose what was best for me, and not just go along with what other people wanted. The next morning, I woke up to a quiet house, sunlight streaming in through the windows, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. No more pretending, no more walking on eggshells, just me, in a place where I was wanted. And that felt pretty damn good.